welcome to Inside Tacoma. I'm your host, Sonia Hallam. I'm joined today by Tacoma City Council Member Kiara Daniels. Hi, Council Member Daniels. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely, this is fantastic.
So you were elected in 2021 for the At-Large Position 6. Can you tell us what an at-large position is?
Yeah, so in terms of voting, we all get the same vote, right? So I have the same vote as the mayor and as the rest of my council members who represent specific districts, but there's a few of us, and I'm one of them, that represents the entire city of Tacoma. And in terms of voting, there is no difference, but what we get to work on or kind of who we see as our constituents is a little bit more broad, and so we get to do different things. Whereas like if I was representing District 3, I might be working on, potholes in my district, or I might be working with the businesses there. But as an at-large person, I'm thinking about things that might be different, or trying to work on issues that affect the entire city of Tacoma, which is like housing, transit, things like that. And we all really care about all of the things, but where our focus points are, we get to kind of hone in on whatever those are, to us.
So rather than just having one district to think about,
right,
you really are focusing on the entire city then.
Right. So I live in Hilltop, I'm from Hilltop, and that's really where my love and passion is. But I care about Hilltop just like I care about the East Side, just like I care about the North End, and really all of the districts.
So let's talk a little bit about your background and your interests. I always think it's interesting to talk to the council members about your background, because you bring your own personal experiences, and that has to influence how you think about things and what you care about. And you have such a rich and interesting, diverse background. So tell us a little bit about some of your experiences that influence how you think about issues and the way you engage as a council member.
I have done so many jobs that I think that people would not even believe. And I think that, and each of them plays a little bit of a role in what I bring to council, right? Like I've worked in a coffee factory when I was younger, and that really makes me think about our families who do manufacturing and what their life is like, right? I also worked at I was an educator for several years, and that is really where I got my passion, doing service work. That's where I got my passion for the whole of our systems, right? I worked at McCarver Elementary, and in the last several years, that school has gone through so much transition. And we had, at one point of the year, we had, 80 kids in a program. And then kind of towards the middle of the year, we had almost half of the program leave, not because they left the program, but because they moved schools, because their family was displaced for one reason or the other. And for me, that was really eye-opening in terms of like thinking about how can I help little ones learn social emotional skills when they don't have some of the tools that they need at home in terms of stability, housing, food, and things like that. Like that's really what contributes to a whole person or a whole child, as we call it in the schools, right? And so I really wanted to start working on that, and that's how I got into housing and business, and which eventually led me here.
So your background as an educator, I think, is really interesting. And I know I've heard you talk so many times about issues that are impacting youth, and I know that's something you're passionate about. So I have to think that your work as an educator influenced that. So can you talk more about how that had an impact? What did you take away from that experience that you reflect on now as a council member?
Well, first of all, I am a child at heart. That is, I will always be a youth. And so I identify with young people so much. And, and being in the city of Tacoma as a young person, I kind of felt stifled. And I identify with young people who feel that way and feel like there isn't a lot of opportunity here. And it's ironic because this is the city of destiny. And so for me, I was in so many programs as a young person that exposed me to just different things, to Microsoft, to programming, to just different interests and things that you don't really get to learn in school every day. And so that was critical for me in rounding out who I was going to be and what I was going to do. And government was never what I thought I was going to do, but if I have the opportunity to impact a young person's life or inspire them to maybe come do this or help expose them to different jobs or different things that they wouldn't know otherwise, then that is my duty and that is what I committed to do here.
One of the initiatives or areas that you have supported is the coding work and the summer program.
Yeah.
Does that have a connection to some of the experience you had as a young person?
Yeah, I think back to, oh God, I don't want to age myself, but a long time ago, I used to go to a program on MLK, and it was like a nightly after-school program, and we would go there. The Intel Computer Clubhouse is what it was called. And so we had computers, there was a studio there, we would like make websites and programs, and it was co-ed, so there was all the kids from the neighborhood and kind of everybody just in one room just learning how to do different things like type or whatever we wanted to work on and explore. And in doing that, I learned, number one, coding and technology was not my ministry. I learned that, but I had really close friends that it did become their ministry, and they have gone to the Institute of Technology in Massachusetts and have come back to bring their tools and skills here. But the other thing I learned outside of knowing that it wasn't for me was learning that how we can use technology to change the world, and also how in a changing city, in a growing city, what part technology plays. And regardless of if it is for every kid, it's definitely going to be a part of their lives, whether they want it to be or not. And I want to make sure with the coding camps and with all of the other things that we do in the future that we are preparing them for a future that is really ingrained in technology. So,
look, also, I want to go back to your work as an educator.
Yeah.
And talk about some of the, you mentioned this just briefly in passing, but when you were working with some of these young people and their families, you had the experience of working with youth who were experiencing challenges in their families, whether that be with their ability, food insecurity or housing issues. Tell us about what you experienced and how that has shaped the way that the trajectory of your career, not just with council, but what you did after being an educator and to become a council member.
I think that seeing how hard our families are working to survive was kind of life-changing for me, right? And there's a lot of things that kids are missing at home, and it's not because parents don't have it. It's really just, our society is very expensive, and so they're working to take care of little brothers and sisters and to put food on the table, and they're having to work multiple jobs to do that, right? And it's really been difficult for them to keep a roof over their head, and I recognize how we, as the rest of the city, can play a part in doing our part as a village to help raise these little ones. And I think working in education, you get to see what it's like when the village is full. And I really appreciated that about working in after school care and being able to kind of help our parents and learn different things about them and how we support them supports our young ones.
And I would think that includes you touched on this already, housing issues, which I know is important to you.
It's huge. It's huge.
So since you've been elected back in 2021, a lot's happened with the council related to housing. And I think before you were elected, Home in Tacoma had not yet been adopted. So that's happened. And last year was the year of housing with the legislature. So a lot has taken place. Can you talk about some of your views and your interests and why you care so much about housing?
Yeah, I had, I think everybody has their own kind of, well, I assume everybody has their own story with housing and with home. And for me, housing is really like belonging, right? That's what you get at the end of it, right? Is when you have a place to live, you have a home and you have belonging. And I think that placemaking is what makes really great community. And I think it helps us to do all of the things that we want to do in Tacoma in terms of keeping people safe, right? I think all of that starts with making sure that people have safe and stable housing. And so I think about it from so many different angles, and I've learned about affordable housing because in 2007, my mom lost our house in the housing crisis in Tacoma. And that was so impactful for not only her, but for the rest of our family who found refuge in the house that my grandmother had passed down, right? And after that, we didn't really have a place to gather. And I think that had huge impacts on me as a young person, but then also my nieces and nephews and cousins of where is home for our family, and where is the place that we find safe, right? And now that I have been able to purchase my own home.
So let's talk about that. 'Cause as you're talking, I'm thinking this has to be a huge driver for you to want to be a homeowner.
Yeah.
But that path wasn't an easy one for you, was it?
I have studied public systems, so I understand paperwork, I understand money, I understood how to purchase a house. But if it was that difficult for me to purchase a home, I think how difficult could that be for anybody else in our community? And so I already had a fire for housing, but that really lit my fire to begin to work on barriers in home ownership.
So what kind of challenges did you face?
Just, the programs that we have, the financial programs, right? Like down payments and down payment assistance from the feds and from, state and city, those programs aren't really designed to work together. And so you either make too much money or you don't make enough money. And it's just really hard for not only our families to get into the housing system, but it's also hard for our providers, for like even the nonprofits that are providing housing for people, to get them in there because our systems are kind of fragmented. And so that's some of the work that is really important to me, and that I want to continue to work on, is putting those systems together.
So you actually were very involved this past session in House Bill 1474. That was the bill that created the Covenant Home Ownership Program. Mm-hmm. That's a program that, through a document recording fee, creates funding that would be available to people to help them with closing costs and down payment assistance for people who are in economically disadvantaged groups. This was something that you were very involved in during session. I know you testified on the bill. Can you talk about that and why is that important to you? I mean, obviously with your experience, but why was that bill particularly important? First of all, I really enjoyed testifying because I feel like if I can't do anything else, there's one thing I can do, is use my voice and tell my story. As a person in Tacoma who's trying to create housing for others, I think it's really important to do that, not only at the city level with our developers and folks that are providing homes, but at the state level as well, where the rubber meets the road in terms of getting money and down payment assistance to folks. And what we're finding is that we have a lot of programs, but the programs don't have enough money. And even with those programs, we find that our families are not
even if we're giving 10 or 20,000, it's still not enough to cover the gaps that we have in down payment.
So what's the impact of that?
I think the impact of this program, first of all, it's the start of many, and it's the start of us really taking housing serious if we want to get to these gaps in capital that our families have. But I think just supporting our families more and getting them into that first home, I think is so critical, and I think it's going to be tremendous. And I don't know what the outcome is going to be of just this one bill, but I know that one starts the next, starts the next, and starts the next, and acknowledging that there are folks in our community that have been systematically disenfranchised is a key part of that, and that's why this bill was so important to me.
So let's talk about that a bit more. So the bill is intended to focus on groups of people who have been, as the language of the bill says, economically disadvantaged. It's obviously important to be able to provide the ability to own a home, to build wealth. Can you talk about how you see that impacting the city and the community within Tacoma?
Yeah. So in Tacoma, over half, or it's almost exactly half of our community rents their property. And that seems okay, except for it's not, because that means that half of our community is not able to accumulate wealth. When they're not able to accumulate wealth, that has impacts, that leaves them vulnerable when we have spikes in inflation, right? Because they don't have anything to lean on. And so when you have a home, you're allowed, you can loan against it if you want to start a business, if you want to, join our economic development, our economy, you have more options to join our economy. And that's what we really need, is a strong economy. And we can't do that when we don't have a significant amount of people in our community owning their property. There's also so many other things that come along with ownership, right? Like just pride in your property, right? You are able to participate in different ways when you own your land. And again, it goes back to belonging and how people are able to access the city of Tacoma.
So you've talked in the past about some of the work that you did with Habitat for Humanity. And as you're talking, I'm feeling like some of the things that you're saying connect to maybe the work that you did there.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what your connection is with Habitat?
Yeah. So I did a year of service with Habitat, and my job was to bring folks out and work with the families and kind of just be on the job site building. So I got to know each of the families that were building each other's houses, and then I got to see them get blessed and come in their house and be there, and then I got to see them live there. And it was such an inspiring experience to see how they became a community with each other, with their neighbors, by building their house, and how much pride they took in becoming an owner, and what that meant for not only them, but for their young people for their children, and what that meant for the children to have a home and their own room, and what pride that gave them and what belonging that gave them. And that's something that I knew was a thing because it happened to me and I experienced that. But seeing so many different families get to experience that joy and that pride, life-changing.
So you have been involved in a lot of different initiatives. You're a member of the Habitat Board, but you're also involved in the Black Home Initiative. Yeah. And that was also a group that supported the House bill that created the Covenant Home Ownership Account. Can you talk a little bit about the Black Home Initiative, which is the regional effort to try to provide more opportunities for home ownership for Black families in the Puget Sound region?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit earlier about folks that have been economically disadvantaged. In the state of Washington and specifically in the city of Tacoma, we have Black people that have been disadvantaged, right, economically and in many other ways. But economically is the one place where we can work on that disparity. And we have a lot of opportunity to get folks into homes, and not just into homes temporarily. We have the opportunity to get them into ownership, which goes back into wealth, and where we can start to even the playing field. And so home ownership is a huge part of that. And with the Black Home Ownership Initiative, we're working on a lot of stuff. It's not as easy as you think or as people think it would be to create housing, right? Like, you can't, what I thought coming into council is that, oh, we could just build a few houses and we could solve this problem tomorrow if we just have enough. We know what the numbers are. We just got to build enough. It's not that simple. And so in the BHI, we're working on not only creating more housing, but we're also working with the individuals to get them financially prepared to deal in this market, because this market is really rough. And then we're also working to come together with service providers, with folks, private and public legislators, also with families with lived experience, to create to fix these systems that have kind of locked people out for so long. And that's why I think that work is really critical, because it doesn't work if only the legislators are working on it or if only the service providers are working on it. It's really got to be a combination, and it's got to include folks that build housing. That's a huge part, and that's where I think this initiative is really cool.
So you recently had a chance to talk about some of these housing issues with U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Secretary Fudge, who was visiting here in Washington. That must have been really interesting.
It was amazing, and for nerds like me who really like housing and really are working on that, that is like meeting Secretary Fudge was like the peak, right? And so getting to talk to her not only about like what they do and what they're trying to do for cities like Tacoma, but really explaining what we need in the city of Tacoma and how we've already been working on this and how we have so many rock stars in housing already. I think that was really cool, and she was super impressed with the work that we're doing in Tacoma.
So what kind of things did you tell her about? What did you talk about?
Well, we got to talk about how Tacoma is really present in the housing conversation at the state level. We also talked about how we partner with our builders, and we talked about really just that we've already done the disparity studies. We already know, what we need to do, and we just need our federal government's help to get there. And so having a plan already and knowing what we need was really, really good.
What kind of things do you think that they can offer? Did she give you any indications of what might be coming?
Well, I talked a little earlier about like our funding sources lining up, and HUD really provides a lot of those funding sources, and they don't always work with our state. And so getting a chance to talk to her team and her about how they can align those sources was, I think, will be helpful to us in the future.
It's really impressive how much that you have been involved in. And I think the fact that you were invited to sit at the table and have that conversation with Secretary Fudge is a testament to how important you are in this conversation and how you've really moved the needle for the city and the residents in the city. So I'm curious if you have any other things planned or other conversations you're looking forward to.
I don't know what's planned. I always get surprised by opportunities, and Lyle Qasim always says the reward for doing good work is more work. And so I welcome anything that comes in the next 2 years, but my commitment when I started has always been I will not leave here until we get people housed. And that is going to continue to be my commitment.
It has been wonderful to talk with you today. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for watching Inside Tacoma today, and we'll see you next time.